good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where everyone's joining from. Those of you who are joining us, a huge thanks if you're joining me live today. Appreciate you being here with us live. For those of you who are watching the recording, it's great to have you here as well. Our takeaways and our thoughts and everything like that are going to be the same, regardless of when you're catching this or when you're seeing it. So my name is Matt. I am the lead solutions engineer over here at LimaCharlie. Always looking forward to having a great discussion with folks about ways that LimaCharlie can, I think, help improve either a current part of your organization or your enterprise, depending on what your use case is. And I'm looking forward today. This is part 3 of a 4-part series in the CISO's Guide to Efficient and Effective Security Operations, or SecOps. Obviously here representing LimaCharlie, the SecOps cloud platform. Today, we're going to focus on managing open source costs. And this really should be managing free and open source costs, but I'm careful to throw the free in there. Now, a quick note for everyone in today's session. I want this to be conversational. It's probably going to be more of me talking to you from a open source cost perspective. But if something does come up and you're like, hey, what about this? What about that? Feel free to bring that up, because I'm not going to name any tools in particular. I want to talk more about the business processes and the things that go into operations when we decide to use free and open source tools in our tech stack. So that being said, if you have a question about a particular thing or about a particular approach, feel free to ask me and I'll happily drill down on that, but I'm not going to bring those up. I want to throw another disclaimer out into the wild before we get started. The other disclaimer being, when we talk about utilizing free and open source software, it's a very large and wide category. I'm not simply referring to, all right, well, this is a well-established thing, and I am, utilizing a cloud provider that has a component of a free and open source software, and it's kind of managed by them. What I mean by that is, if you're going to a cloud provider, a GCP, an AWS, or an Azure, and you're deploying a tech stack that utilizes open source software on there, the problem that I'm going to focus on today is not the scalability that is in the cloud provider, but in the scalability or the management of the open source software itself. So I want to start out with that kind of predecessor, that caveat, if you will. There's multiple ways to deploy these, and we'll kind of drill down into some of these issues as we move our way through this morning's discussion as well. I'm going to go ahead and get us started and kind of, start to dig into this further. Speaking of which, let's get started. This is usually the first place. The first decision point for anyone who's looking to utilize free and open source software is they want to get started with a thing. Now, whether you're bringing your own company together and you're in that kind of co-founder role, or for the focus of today's discussion, you're in that CISO role and you're saying to yourself, my team needs to be able to do a thing. We need to be able to build or deliver on a service, or we need to be able to enable functionality, or we need to be able to do a thing that we weren't able to do before. How do I go about finding and enabling and empowering my team as quickly as I possibly can? This is where it starts. We need technology. We need technology that does a thing. I need to be able to do a thing inside of an environment, and I need to be able to do that thing now. I don't need to be able to do that thing as soon as I possibly can. Now, where open source comes into play a lot is when someone's just kind of getting started out. When they're starting up or building their own company, or they're building a new service or a new capability, a lot of these questions come into mind. How do I keep costs low? How do I get the features that I want to deliver on right now? But unfortunately, there's this limitation of I can't hire a development team to get there. Because it would be great if I could just simply say, let me go hire some developers. We're going to build the thing that we need to build, or that we want to provide a service on top of. And that's where we're going to start. A lot of times, free and open source software comes into play primarily because someone's looking for a way to get started faster with their costs a little bit lower. So there's a few things we need to keep in mind here. The first being costs. We've already identified upfront that costs are a big issue. If you're looking at free and open source software, the free part is going to be the initial disclaimer there, free, which means my costs are low. The second one's going to be features. I want to build an incident response team. I want to build an incident response capability. I want to build an MSSP, an MDR. I want my current SOC to be able to provide better response services and faster response services. These are features that we're going to chase and go after. Now, you want costs to be low. You want features to be high, but you can't hire a development team. Unfortunately, we've gotten to a point here where I can't build this out myself. And as a CISO, as a founder, as a builder, as someone who might be looking at utilizing this software, I've realized my limitations, but I've also realized the aspirations and the things that I want inside of my environment. I need technology. I need it to be cheap. I need it to have features, but I can't hire anyone to build it for me. So I'm going to look to the community and see what's out there, the free and open source community. Let's pause right here. There's a couple of ways to arrive at this. The first one might be, as I mentioned earlier, I need a thing. Let me go see what tools are out there that do the thing that I'm trying to do. I want my team to have vulnerability scanning capabilities as part of my security tech stack. Let me go see what's out there, what's free and open source that we can start to rely on. Or you might go the other way and say, I want to provide an amazing vulnerability scanning service or managed service for folks. How do I go about quickly getting the access and the data, or quickly getting the data that I need to build a service on top of? Either way, we're in the exact same place, which is something drove us to start to look at this. Here's the issue. These concerns, they become your foundation. These become your foundation of, I need low costs, I need crazy high features, and I don't have the time to hire a development team. And these become the foundation with which you start to build your business. And these become the foundations with which you start to enable your team or empower your team, and you start to work things up. You get used to this unfortunate position of, wait, we were able to achieve what? And we were able to do that for how much? And I find this question to be one of the quintessential issues, is that we look at what we were able to achieve out of open source software as this really weird conundrum. I can't believe this tool does X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and everything else in between. That's exactly what I was looking for and what I was needing. Well, there's a couple of issues in here. Number one, the first is, if you have access to it, everyone has access to it. Number two, if you are that person who said, I need to empower my team to do a thing, and you went to go look and see what the industry had to offer that was out there, and that's what you're building your team around, that's what the community offered, and that's what you're building your team around, then you actually are going after the features of that particular tool. You're not necessarily going after what it is that your team needed. We run into this one a lot when we run into organizations that are utilizing free and open source software. I'm going to talk about limits and constraints a little bit later into our conversation here. But a lot of times folks say, I want an open source tool that will let me do incident response functionality. I'm not going to name any names. I'm not going to pick on any tools in particular, but I'm just going to say that question, that empowerment team of, I want my team to be able to do incident response, and I want them to be able to do it as cheaply as they possibly can. As cost effectively as they possibly can. It's a massive question. That's a massive question to ask, to then turn around and say, what am I able to get for free in this case? Now, cybersecurity is a very unique industry, I think, because there is so much access and so much availability to an open source community that is actually very powerful and very capable. But if you're at an enterprise and you need to start to provide either a non-revenue functionality like a security team, they need to start to build a foundation on top of that. Or if you're a founder or someone who's looking to kind of create a new service or a new functionality or a new capability or a new company around it, you're now looking for a tech stack that becomes the foundation of what it is that you're putting together. And the first question that pops up is always, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're able to achieve this for this cost. It feels cheap. It feels almost like I shouldn't tell anyone else about this secret. But the issue that really happens is it becomes addictive. It becomes really addictive. Open source technology is fantastic in the beginning. It really is. And depending on the size of your very first implementation, it can be a massive margin enabler as well. Wait a second. My team needed incident response capabilities, and we were able to just quickly spin up or deploy a thing and then go and achieve that particular function, and we're done. And it was quick and it was fast and there were no issues and we didn't have to deal with anything. We didn't have to fight any contracts. All we had to do was simply spin up, deploy, and go. This is amazing. If you're starting your first company or you're providing your service for the very first time, Depending on the size of your first implementation, you may look back and say to yourself, that was almost pure profit because the tooling I had was free. Now, quick caveat for everyone here. Another one, if you will. I'm not drilling too much into the licensing and I'm not drilling too much into the open source nature of this because I'm well aware of the number of companies that I talk to on a weekly basis who are building their tech stacks or who are building their security tech stacks on top of open source software, whether they're aware of the licensing agreements or not. So let's just nip that one in the bud. All right. Number two, everything is great for your first implementation. Everything is great the first time you turn the tool on and you see that it works. Everything is great that very first time you achieve the functionality that you were looking to do because it was exactly what you thought you were looking for. And I'm describing open source technology like this long lost relationship that you thought you never had. But to be very true and frank, when you want your team to have a particular type of functionality or a particular type of service, you look at it and then it just works the first time around. It's amazing. Here's the issue. You created all of these feelings and all of this, this wonderful hit, this wonderful thing. You created this on top of, I need it to be cost effective. I need it to be feature rich, and I don't have the time towards developing it. It's a great foundation. The problem there is that's not the question you should be asking. The first consideration should always be, can we do this again? How will this technology help me scale past my first implementation, my first service, my first customer, whatever the approach may be? How do I use this thing to scale further? That's got to be the starting point. That's got to be where all of our considerations begin. There's a big reason for this one. If the software or tool that I'm using does not scale well, or it does not allow me to scale well, then my customer limitation or my implementation from an enterprise perspective is going to be 1. I can handle 1 IR using this thing. We can handle 1 tech stack using this thing with a single time use or a one-time use behind it. That consideration doesn't come into mind for a lot of folks or a lot of organizations because you get really stuck on that. It just worked feeling. I didn't have to go anything through it. How will this technology help me scale past my first implementation is the first consideration. The second one should be, was this technology that I'm looking at, that I'm using, actually designed for scalability? And was it tested in an environment that featured or utilized scalability? And let me be clear. Someone's README file that says we can be deployed on a cloud provider or we can be deployed in containers does not mean it's easily scalable. I want to go back to the original root of the foundation here. I should say the root of the foundation you built, because they could kind of be synonymous with each other. The root of the foundation you built was, I don't have development time to build this thing out myself. And yet you're utilizing taglines as a way to justify and say, well, it's okay. We don't need to be developers because this thing scales because I can throw it into this technology or this software that my security team, and I'm looking around, are not experts on. But according to the README file, it can easily be scaled. And according to the README file, it can easily be deployed inside of a scale-friendly environment, if you will. Here's the issue. Let's pause right here. Does your team utilize containerization? Does your team utilize Docker? Does your security team have a direct link to a cloud provider? Do you have someone on your security team who can manage all of these things? A software developer, DevSecOps? Do you have someone who's fully prepared to read that statement of scale or container, available in a container, or here's a Docker file to deploy this thing? And can they immediately look at it and say, I know what the limitations of this are? Because if they don't, you've got a security team who's going to look at this and say, yeah, we can easily scale this thing, boss. If we need to, no problem. We can just deploy it in containers. And if we need to, we can tell the containers to scale up. We can do all of these things. There's an issue here. How much of your business are you building around the success of that very first implementation? It works. It's great. It's scalable. It can handle whatever I throw at it. There's an issue here. As I'm sure you can probably tell where I'm going with this whole conversation today, is if I'm building my business around, if I'm building my implementation, my service, my whatever, my team, my tech stack around the first time that something worked, we're going to get stuck in this cycle of, wait a second, why doesn't it work anymore? Why wasn't this as good as the first time? How much of your business are you building around the success of the first implementation? Because back then you had time. You had time to say, go ahead and test this and see what it looks like. You had time to say, I need to find a way to provide a service. I need to find a way to build a thing. We didn't have any expectations from before because we didn't know what was out there. But now we have this tech stack. We're good to go. Now I want it faster. I want more. I want it to scale. We used it on 10 systems. Now I want to use it on 100 systems. You see how really quickly the idea of this thing just works scales up in our minds before we even start to scale it from a tech perspective. But the issue with the very first implementation was you had time. And as your business starts to grow, as your team, your BU, your security team's functionality, your needs, your tech stack, whatever it might be, as it continues to grow, your team will find that you have less and less time available. However, if I'm building a tech stack that requires me to have time, as it did in the beginning, something's going to break. Something's going to give. Thus, we get to kind of like the core of the problem here. What's actually involved in keeping a free and open source tech stack alive? And I see this a lot. Organizations we talk to, we've got quite a few case studies here on the LimaCharlie side of folks who run into this a lot. What's needed in keeping free software, free tools alive after that very first glorious implementation? We've got to maintain the underlying systems that run them. I might have a host, a hypervisor, a cluster, a Kubernetes, whatever. I've got to keep all those things maintained. I've got to keep them going. It's a free and open source library, which means code is published. It's a free and open source tool, which means code is published. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm getting those updates as soon as I possibly could. So now I need a team member to help manage that code and maintain it inside of my environment. That's maybe something I wasn't aware of before. I need to mitigate the shortcomings that come out of that thing. The more and more I want out of this tool, the more and more I have to remember this is being authored and created by someone who doesn't work for me. This is being created and authored by someone who might be designing this tool for a different use case. They might be designing this tool for a different functionality. And just because our paths crossed at one point in time doesn't mean they're going to continue to flow together. But furthermore, I thought these are all the things that we didn't want to do. I thought when we started out, we didn't want to hire developers. We didn't want to maintain code. We didn't want to maintain systems. We didn't want to have to deal with all the shortcomings of the tool here. We didn't want to have to focus on this. That's the whole reason I started with that. That's the whole reason I started this BU, this company, this service, this product, this whatever with an open source tool, is because I didn't want to have to focus on any of these things. I just wanted a tool that worked. And then as time goes on and I started to have less of it, I found my tool started requiring more of it. I've got a great quote here from it's very public. It's published on the LimaCharlie website in our blogs. Great quote from Recon InfoSec, a customer we've done an amazing work and built a great relationship with. Very straightforward. There were increasing costs and complexity to maintain a custom security stack. Long story short, folks, when I'm building a security stack that relies on open source tooling, whether you're providing a service to other customers or whether you're providing a service to other BUs inside of an organization, one thing never changes. You're going to end up spending more hiring resources and bringing people on board to help you manage and maintain the tech stack than you would have ever thought before. Problem is, that's not what a security team's focus is. A security team's focus should not be managing a cluster, managing a database, managing a set of containers, auto scaling up and down. I need my security team to be doing security work. I want the underlying infrastructure part just taken care of. I want it solved. The core competency of my security team or of my security business is providing security. It's not uptime. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying uptime's not important. I'm just saying if you're hiring a security team and as part of the job requirements, it says management of open source database software, management of open source EDR software, you're also hiring developers, or you're hiring infrastructure operators, or you're hiring engineers, not security engineers, because you're bringing someone on board with the expectation of they know how to keep this beast up alive and running, which has likely been cobbled together after years and years of experience. And unfortunately, the other thing that you're doing is you're limiting the future of your business. The future of the business is going to be dictated by whether the tech stack has the ability to grow or not. And that's not what you started using free software for. You did not use free software to say, I think I'm going to reach 10 customers and stop there. You did not use free software to say, we're only going to need to use this once. We'll never need to use it again. You started using free software because it was what you needed at the time. But as your business scales and grows, look at those costs and realize this is not what I'm here for. Thus, I get to the part of where LimaCharlie can help and where I think we'd be able to form a good relationship if anything I've just described in the previous 18 minutes or so is you. First off, I usually show this at the end of our little CISO series, maybe? I usually show them at the end of our CISO series here, but I'm going to show it at the very beginning here. This is what we do as a SecOps cloud platform, as a platform that allows you to build and consume the different pieces that you need from a security perspective. Infrastructure is just handled for you. We take care of it. We take care of it in a vast, wide range of ways. We offer capabilities that can cater to DFIR purposes if your BU needs that. We can cater towards the needs of a SOC, whether it's intelligence or detection, whether it's data retention, whether it's telemetry from anything, whether it's an API first approach. We make all of that available for you. Scalability, done. You don't need to hire that developer anymore. You simply need to tell your team, just go and secure. The infrastructure side of it is handled. I like to also sit here and say that we can sit between the middle of whatever complex environment you think you have deployed out there. From EDR visibility, SaaS telemetry, data lakes, routing and data optimization, observability, whatever it might be, we can handle all of that from an infrastructure perspective. Meaning, again, that requirement that you had for your team to be able to keep these tools or keep this open source or this free tech stack up and running goes away. That full FTE or FTE plus one that you've hired to manage this tech stack, they can go and be a security person now. We handle the infrastructure for you so that you can focus on growing the business, the implementation, the need, the functionality, whatever it is that you set out in the very beginning to do. That's what we want you to focus on building. That's what we want you to focus on doing. As that CISO, you're able to step back from an organization or step back and represent your security team and say, we're going about this in a cost-effective manner because we took a hard look at the numbers and free actually isn't free. It's a tough thing to get to because it looks really great on the bottom line to be able to say, we got this great tool and we're paying absolutely nothing for it. But then I start to talk to my team and I realize they're spending more time managing this tool, managing this database, managing this data lake, managing this thing than they are actually in the business of security. We talk a lot in cybersecurity about analysis paralysis and alert fatigue and all of these things, burnout, so on and so forth, that folks have to deal with. But there's an underlying truth in there as well, which is the more tool management your team has to do. And we talked about tool sprawl in our very first session as this 4-part series. But when your team is having to manage all of these things, it wears on them. There's only so many hours in the day. Let them focus more on the security side of things. Now, before anyone comes back and says, well, Matt, hold on, this sounds a lot like what I heard from the last guy or gal who told me to just migrate over to my stuff, their stuff, because it would be easier. And you're going to come back and say, but we've built a custom security stack. We've built a custom approach. Great. Keep it. In fact, I want you to integrate it. That's the beauty of a platform like LimaCharlie as a SecOps cloud platform. I don't want to rip and replace everything you've already put in there. I want to take that middle infrastructure layer that you've got, and I want to take away the headache. We solve headaches here. I want to take away the headache of infrastructure and the headache of that middle layer that you have to deal with. Keep it, integrate it. We're an API first SecOps cloud platform. Build anything. Well, wait a second, Matt, we don't have developers. Remember, that was a core foundation we talked about. You're right. So we make it super easy for you to integrate with our platform, route data where you need to, and bring those tools that you have into your working environments. But Matt, our custom tools, the things that we've built on top of the things that we've built, bring them too. Deploy and execute as you need to. Deploy and execute them where you need to, as you need to. Bring telemetry in from anything and make it actionable. Open up your security team to things that they may not have thought possible from before. But my team is used to, that's the old way, tech limitations and tools cobbled together. Team members stretched too thin. It's not really what you got into this business for, was it? I don't think so. I think when you got started or when you started to build out a functionality for your team, it was great to be able to say we did this thing for free, but the team is probably stretched too thin. and managing and handling infrastructure is not their job. You're representing a security team or a security organization. Let's let them be security folks. And then last but certainly not least, last little tidbit I wanted to drop in here. Another objection I get or another use case I hear is, but my customers are used to, and I'm going to say they're used to your limitations, the things that you were able to do because you were relying on a cumbersome, cobbled together tech stack that required you to maintain it and manage it. And that took time out of your team's ability to effectively build a service. I know this because the proof is in the pudding. The folks that utilize LimaCharlie, they find six-figure cost reductions when they utilize us for infrastructure. They're able to build brand new services, brand new capabilities that they weren't able to build before because they were focused on, we're not developers, but I'm security folk, but I'm a security team is drowning and dealing with all these things. We've got organizations that come in here and they say, we want a brand new functionality or a thing that we didn't have before. Fantastic. Put it with us. If I take away the tech stack limitation that your free software is currently holding you to, what's the future look like for your BU? What's it look like for your organization? What's it look like for your customers? Imagine if you were able to say, I want to build a thing, or I want to offer a thing, or I want to provide a thing. And the infrastructure simply stood back and said, let's go. We got you. It's one of the cool powers, one of the cool benefits of LimaCharlie. SecOps Cloud Platform lets you scale infinitely, build out what you need, where you need, when you need it, and how you want it. Depending on your level of involvement, we can assist you in everything from developer-focused security operations. But for those of you who are watching this and saying, Matt, you're telling me that I don't have the time for all this, and I don't, fantastic. We make it even easier for you. We've got a great team here, ready to work with you, ready to migrate over and say, where are you currently experiencing issues with your free and open source technology? Let's help you find it. Let's help you find those efficiencies, find a little bit of cost effectiveness on the way. But more importantly, what is it that you want your team to do next? And what is infrastructure currently holding you back from? All right, everyone. With that said, we're right at time. Another fantastic session. Thank you all for joining me. You know where to find me in the socials, LinkedIn, and our LimaCharlie community Slack. That's at slack.limacharlie.io if you'd like to join. Other than that, if you found anything in here helpful or anything you'd like to drill into a little bit further, please let me know. Happy to have that conversation. With that said, everyone, it's Matt once again here at LimaCharlie, and it's been great chatting with you. I'll see you all again in a couple of weeks for our next CISO focused series, our fourth and final one. Watch out for the Slacks and watch the socials for the announcement on that. All right. Take care, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Thank you.